Okay, and so far our closing statement. So what we want to try to figure out is, what is the moral of the story going forward from what we've just heard in our presentation? So if we're considering our basic circular flow economic diagram that you'll see in any standard economics textbook, first chapter, you see the flow and consumption of goods, production, jobs, income. But what is actually missing from this diagram? If we're considering physics, right, you can't make something out of nothing. And in this case, we have to consider that there is an economic value or an economic cost to environmental detriment. But in order to go from where we are right now into a better alternative future, we have to consider two questions, two moral questions. Now, question one, do you weigh the plight of poverty similarly to the coal mining of mountaintops? Countries, emerging markets, low-income and low-middle-income countries, they are right now forced with the challenge of bringing millions and millions of people out of poverty. China, for example. Coal, there's a dependency on coal because it's cheap, it's easy to create production, to expand, create jobs. It's a technology that is already there. Asking them to come to a full halt is impractical. It's not pragmatic, it's not realistic. It's the technology that they have now, and we have to figure out a way to tweak it and reduce carbon emissions. Our second question is, what's worse? Thousands of coal plants worldwide with no way to capture and store their emissions, or potential for periodic carbon leakage from underground carbon storage sites? So, CCS, this is not something new, right? This is something that nature already does. Photosynthesis, for example, plants do this. Plants they capture carbon dioxide from the air, they store it, and they use that to kind of fuel their activities, oxygen. Same thing with algae. Algae, for example, in the ocean, it captures about 30 to 40% of carbon dioxide in the air that's already being emitted. And what we're doing is really just an artificial reinvention of that process already. This is not something new. Even the technology for geological storage is already being used by oil companies, and successfully. Just as well, storage. One company in Holland, for example, takes that storage, doesn't completely have to store all of it, and actually uses that for horizontal shifts within the marketplace. It transports that carbon dioxide to, for example, the 400 greenhouses that exist within Holland. And those greenhouses use that for their plants, for this kind of recycling of nature. And an emphasis on renewable energy is simply postponing a process to reverse the tide against increasing CO2 emissions. As said before, a much more realistic and pragmatic approach to emerging market development. These countries are trying to bring out millions of people out of poverty. If we look at the numbers, for example, 53% of low and middle income countries are the largest, they are the largest emitter of carbon dioxide emissions. Same thing with middle income countries. High income countries have recently started to find a decrease, declining it little by little. But considering this technology, this is what exists, this is what is there. Just tweaking the system a bit, we can already focus on now. We can focus on today. We don't have to focus on 2030, 2050. This is the solution for right now, to a better bridge, to bridge to a better alternative future where we can cut carbon emissions and cleaner energy, cleaner skies.